Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're hanging out with Patrick Henningsen. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here. We're hanging out with Patrick Henningsen. He is the editor and founder or founder over at 21stcenturywire.com. Let me just give you a quick, in case you haven't seen that, it's a great site. I've checked it out for many a year now. I'll find it somewhere. There you go. It is 21st Century Wire. They've done a lot of good work over the course of the years. They're on top of a lot of good stuff. So 21stcenturywire.com. Also, I believe you're over there at what, UK Column News?
Yeah, co-anchor at UK Column News. I do Friday news plus podcasts as well with them. And Substack, you've got the link down there. I just started a new Substack channel, so we're just getting it going. And just full disclosure, I have not paid Garland Nixon anything to wear that hat today. That was just, he did that on his own steam.
Yeah, I'm proud. I'm proud to have that hat. I got it a few years back, and it's right there on my hat rack. And I thought I got to start wearing that hat again. It's a great hat. And for those of you who don't know, I ain't going to touch this. I'll just throw it out there. I don't know if you've seen this story. Macron to attempt to prove in U.S. court his wife is a woman. Well, I wish him the best of luck with that attempt. I mean, we certainly don't know how it's going to turn out, but he's going to make an attempt. As soon as I read that, I thought, if like I got a news that like some woman I dated 25 years ago and it said, hey, guess what? Remember so-and-so, yeah, she's going to go to court to attempt to prove she's a woman. I'd be like, ooh, did you say attempt? Yeah, I'll put it like this. I would never go to court to attempt to prove that I was a man.
No way. There's an old Shakespeare line, the lady doth protest too much.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's going on here. And this reaffirms my thesis, Garland, that the most powerful woman in France right now is Candace Owens. Yeah. She's got Élysée Palace by the balls, literally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well,
leave it there. We'll leave it there.
How about that? Yeah. Well, they're going to make an attempt, a feeble attempt, though it may be. They're going to make an attempt. I love that story. I just can't get over it. Anyway, that and the one where Macron's getting off the airplane and takes a double whammy to the face. At any rate, all right. Let's move on to real news. Let's talk about this whole Gaza thing. One of the things I did was I named this "No Rules." The Pariah state exposes the barbarism of the Western elite, because we talk about, Netanyahu, and we talk about what's going on in Gaza and what the Israeli government's doing and all of that. But this is the way I look at it. There was an old story, horror movie about some guy whose hand got possessed and his hand would kill people and he couldn't control his hand. In the end, he like cut his hand off or something like that, right? Okay. To argue that Israel's doing something and the Western elite's not behind it is like arguing that my hand is killing someone, but the rest of my body is providing the blood, it's providing the electrical signals, it's doing everything what to do. Now this other hand took a gun and put it in this hand. This other hand pointed and says, there's the victim. And this other hand helped to shield this hand from responsibility and accountability for their actions. But somehow I'm going to pretend that this hand is an evil, barbaric hand and the rest of the body is unconnected. So that's why I say the barbarism, it's barbaric acts, but the Western elite are the ones that are ultimately, in my opinion, held accountable, because there's no way that the Netanyahu government could do it with that. And they're backing everything that anyway, you see where I'm going with this, Patrick Henningsen.
Yeah, you can't a lot of people try to separate this. Oh, it's Netanyahu, it's Israel, Trump's trying to restrain him, the US. They're not really involved in a genocide, except they can't make that argument. But I think to extend your analogy a little further, Garland, your elegant 50s horror stroke anatomical analogy there is that imagine if the person was injecting steroids for 30 years into one of those hands, and it ends up looking like an ATP professional tennis player's forearm. Have you seen tennis players with the forearms? The one they hit the racket with is massive. The other one's just basically hanging there. And so this is what Israel has become. So Israel is a tool of Western dominance and imperialism, Anglo-American specifically. Obviously, the British created Israel, and France provided it with effectively with its nuclear reactor, and the weapons grade nukes they stole from the U.S. Through a couple of different, and that's all in the National Security Archives, by the way. That's all fact, historical fact. But the Americans took over the sponsorship of Israel after its creation, not long after. And so what's happened, it's a quid pro quo, Garland. This is the way I try to explain it to people, because they get asked this question all the time. Is the tail wagging the dog, or is this tail just an instrument of the Western imperialism? And the answer is both. The answer is both. Over time, that tail has grown into a monster, basically. That little dragon of a tail is now this massive behemoth, and it is wagging the dog, but it is so long as Israel can deliver for the Western powers, then it can pursue its Greater Israel project. But the moment it becomes a liability for global capital, which is what we can call it now, then all of a sudden, I think the calculus changes at that point. It can only work that way, because if you look at the world through a realist lens, you're looking at pure power politics, then it has to work that way. And I think we're reaching that moment, Garland, that watershed moment in history, where the colonial settler project that was an instrument, a beachhead for Western power and hegemony right through the Cold War, right till today, we're reaching that watershed moment where it's now becoming a liability. And it's actually becoming an impediment to global capital that would like to do other things in the region and with Eurasia. And there's plenty of signals to this effect right now. So the problem with this, Garland, is this could be very ugly, this transition, because they have created a monster. Look at what's going on in Gaza. How else can you describe what's going on? It's a monstrosity. The state of Israel is an abrogation. It's an abomination of the nation state, the modern nation state. And throughout history, states that engage in this kind of behavior, or regimes that engage, they end up getting dismantled. This is what happens. And don't think that the vendettas that are being created right now, the animus, will last anything less than hundreds of years. And it's just no way to get around that. And the Israelis and the Americans who support them think they can just exterminate any opposition, kill any opposition, wipe them out, assassinate them, murder them, ethnically cleanse them, annihilate them, and that's how you're going to deal with opposition. And it's a self-reproducing problem now, to the point where, I mean, this is biblical. This is biblical, and it's biblical, and it'll end up being one of those great lessons of history. But the problem, Garland, is how much suffering and death, and what are we risking at these last moments of this epic, fable, this biblical fable, lesson of Israel, the lesson of hubris, the lesson, what's at risk? What could they take the entire region of the world down? I mean, how many millions of people are going to die in order for us to kind of somehow get closure on this long, epic tragedy? That's the worry that we all have right now.
Well, what's interesting is, when you listen to Netanyahu, the hubris comes from one thing. I got Uncle Sam in my back pocket. I can do
Mm.
anything I want. Nobody can stop me because I own them. And now the people in the U.S. are like, hey, we don't like this. They're like, I don't give a damn about the people. I own the White House. I own Congress. I own all of that stuff. So I could care less about the American people, about these people marching. It means nothing to me. I have the power center by the short and curly, so I can do anything I want. He was recently talking about autarky. Yes, we've got to be autarchical so we can take care of ourselves. That country's the size of New Jersey. They're not going to produce the things they need inside of that country to keep going. What he really means is the U.S. is our autarky, is that anything we need, we can get from the U.S. Notwithstanding the discussion about Charlie Kirk, the individual, I think the Charlie Kirk dynamic, him being killed, and the seeing all of these conservatives online saying, I think Israel killed him. Whether he did or not, that's up for people out here in the chat. You can decide what you think. But the dynamic of people everywhere saying, I think Israel killed him, being angry about it, and creating a dynamic where the discussion about the relationship between Israel and the United States being negative for the United States is starting to emerge in ideological arenas where it was unacceptable to have that discussion before. I think that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just on the Charlie Kirk story is, it is also a watershed moment. And, we can talk about the anomalies of the shooting and the forensic side of the case. That's a separate discussion. What I see is very, very crystal clear is the political, circumstantial case of the political forces that Charlie Kirk was swimming amongst, that were funding him, and Turning Point USA, and what was expected of Charlie Kirk, and what was expected of his organization to deliver on behalf of those billionaires' donors, some of which were identifying themselves as Christian, others as Jewish, but all as Zionist. Okay. And not only that, the approach, if you follow the gray zone reporting and you believe that to be true, the approach by Netanyahu himself to bankroll Turning Point, the mafia making an offer you can't refuse. Donald Trump got that offer in the 2024 election. He could have won without Mary Madison's 100 million. Could have won without some of the other. She wasn't the only one, by the way, from the Israeli lobby side, or the sort of Jewish American billionaire class and so forth. Total Israeli linked lobby donations for the Republicans, all Republican seats plus the president in 2024 cycle was 600 million. 600 million. Okay. And that even trumps Elon Musk's 250 million, quarter of a billion. So there's a lot of influence there. Charlie Kirk was a political tool. There were expectations that he would be divisive along these certain lines to really promote this fear and hate of Islam, and also characterizing Palestinians as all terrorists and student protesters as pro-Hamas and all this stuff. Now he might have been veering on the Israeli issue in the final, couple months there, and breaking ranks on that issue. Fair enough. That's what a lot of people are saying, and I think there's a lot of credence to those reports, and maybe that might have, the bottom line, Garland, is this: what Charlie Kirk got involved in is probably a lot different than when he started Turning Point in 2012. I mean, the forces of nature that he was amongst there, way above his pay grade as a 31-year-old man. And if you don't have the intellectual wherewithal maybe not at that age, maybe if he was 41 or 51, it'd be a different discussion. But he was used as a tool. And look at how after he's shot, after his death, they continue to use him as a political tool. The same people that put him in power are using him posthumously. I mean, So that's what that's my message to people on this issue is look at the perspective of this and understand that. And then you can delve into the other parts of this, but you really need to know this isn't just a podcaster. And he wasn't just a random conservative guy with an opinion saying, prove me wrong with the coffee mug on the table at the college campuses. He's part of a much bigger thing. And that bigger thing also has a geopolitical element to it. U.S. support of Israel. If he represents 18 to 35-year-olds, that's the future electorate. Those Gen Zers are going to be running the country in a few years. Many of them probably less than that. And if they're veering away from Israel or even becoming, moderate on the issue, that's a problem for some very powerful forces. And those powerful forces have captured the White House. So just bear this in mind, everybody, that what you're looking at here is not a trivial thing. It is part of something very big. And you ever see that movie, The Network, with about Howard Beale?
No, but I've heard about it.
The broadcaster class, and Ned Beatty, the actor, gave this amazing speech in a boardroom where they dragged in this rogue news anchor who was trying to spread the truth and wake people up. He said, "Mr. Beale, you are meddling with the forces of nature." He was talking about the oligarchs and the things that make the world go round in their world, Wall Street and global finance. He's like, "You have no idea what you are meddling with." And when you get into that 100 million a year revenue, that's Turning Point brought in 100 million in 2024. That money comes with expectations, and you cannot go and fly solo. I mean, you just can't. I mean, there's ramifications for that. I can't tell you, if Israel was involved in his killing or not. It's pure speculation. But everything I just said circumstantially is 100% true. That needs to be considered.
A lot of people know my history with the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. This is about this. And I can tell you, people are like, a lot of people say, well, how much money did they make? A lot of money. The last year before I resigned, I was on the National Board of Directors. The last year before I resigned, it took it 300 million. ACLU brings real money. People are like, oh, but they bring 30 million. No. And if you look at how much money they have in their savings and investments, just under $1 billion. Okay. And when I resigned, the reason I resigned was people who were former ACLU were starting to get upset, saying we're just a political group, and like, what are we doing? We're just going along with these political organizations. Well, I can tell you, I remember listening to the head guy talk about some Wall Street guy who gave us 60 million a year. Talk about going to Silicon Valley. Oh yeah, and I helicopter into some billionaires, and I left with 3 or 4 checks, and I had 6 million. Right, real money coming in there, right? And then when COVID came around, when I retired, when I left, I'll tell you the reason I left. Make it clear. I was on the board. It was great. Loved it. Enjoyed it. When we did all of these things, like Nazis would put in for a march, and the government would say they can't have a march, and we'd come and sue them and say, you got to give them a march. That's a First Amendment. People got mad at us, but I'm like, that's what I'm all about. Let's challenge the system. Hey, this is the First Amendment. We're fighting for the First Amendment. I don't care who it is. That was great stuff to me. Well, what came around during COVID. And the ACLU's legal director wrote an article for the New York Times. We're the ACLU. I knew we were going to be against mandates. We're going to fight against all the government saying you got to do this stuff. We're the ACLU. We're fighting that. I know that. Guy writes an article that says, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And no, these mandates don't hurt your freedoms. They actually enhance your freedoms because this thing is safe and effective. And I wrote my resignation. I said, don't ever associate me with this again. And what I put in there was, and I put a screenshot. I went to the Pfizer website, and the Pfizer website says, frequently asked questions, long-term safety. We are still monitoring to determine the long-term safety. And I'm like, so Pfizer says they're still monitoring to figure out the long-term safety. And the ACLU writes an article a legal organization that says definitively it's safe and effective. But when I left, I realized, the kind of money coming in here, and people were starting to elbow me, and former ACLU people are starting to say, man, this thing's gone to hell. And I realized $300 million, man. You feel what I'm getting at? Charlie Kirk didn't understand that. He didn't understand when people give you $100 million, they don't take no for an answer. And I'm not saying, he said lots of stuff I don't agree with. Forget whether I agree. Again, I'm a First Amendment guy. I don't care whether I agree with it or not. The point being, I don't think he understood. I think at 31, he was naive. He didn't understand when that kind of money comes in, buddy, and you say no, they say, oh, no, that's the wrong answer.
Yeah.
And now they put somebody in charge who give the right answer. I'm not going to say how we got there. I think you get my point.
Yeah. And and all the cancellation during COVID for speaking out against the vaccines, and you saw how many people got deplatformed, kicked out of their job, lost their careers, all that stuff. And the right, or the conservatives, were raising Cain over that, saying, oh my God, this is just a violation of the First Amendment, and we need health freedom, free speech, and all that. Look at the left. The left have and it's true. It's true to a large degree. The left had basically absconded from their core values and principles that the ACLU used to stand for, that made it a very important organization for defending the First Amendment. And now, after Charlie Kirk, and all of a sudden, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, hate speech, got to shut down the hate speech. Anybody, and then Rubio wants to extend that to anybody criticizing Israel. I mean, the amount of attacks, direct attacks on the First Amendment in the last 8-9 months from the White House is positively shocking. Going after, hunting down students for writing op-eds against Israel, not even, protesting the American foreign policy per se, although American support for Israel. But so this is just a bit rich, coming from all of the people that were screaming and crying about the authoritarian left. And what does it tell us, Garland? It tells us that when people get into power, left, right, center, doesn't matter. They get into power, and if they're not willing to defend, in America, I can speak from the American perspective, we have a Bill of Rights. Not every country has that. America does. Unless you're willing the government's going to defend that tooth and nail on the principle, not on the special interest or that kind of thing, on the principle of the First Amendment, then the whole system can break down very rapidly. And this is what's happening right now in America. And I think this is just an extension. First, it was the Russia scare. Russian disinformation, cancel, deplatform, hound, harass, attack. I've been a victim of this. You have, and many of our colleagues have. And then COVID comes, another round, and now Trump's in, and they're just going. The irony of this, Garland, is that during 10 years of Russiagate, it's been 10 years. The opposition, the Democrats, the neoliberals, all of these people, they've attacked Trump early on for being a fascist before he even got into office, before he did anything fascistic. And now he's actually doing fascistic things. And I don't see the opposition mobilizing, not in any kind of meaningful way. It's as if they had just shot, as Jamal Thomas said the other day, shot their load on Russiagate, and there's nothing left. Either there's nothing left, or they're quite happy for the state, to retain that power. You see, and that's the lesson from Democrat to Republican to Democrat to Republican, successive. If power is accumulated, especially in the executive branch, look at all the executive orders. This really started under George Bush Jr., Obama, and then Trump and Biden. Just an escalation of executive orders. Eventually, the Supreme Court can rein some of that in over time, or it can be reversed by the next administration. But you just see this accumulation of power in the executive branch to the point where it's just out of control, and we've got a Leviathan already. And that's the problem. I'm going to be more critical, Garland, at conservatives because they brandish the Constitution like it's like, you know, like it's a vestment of the, you know, the bishop's vestment. They brandish that Constitution. They cloak themselves in it. And here's a perfect opportunity to stand on those principles, and they failed. And that to me just shows what an absolute, you know, the whole left-right thing right now is so meaningless because both sides are searching like mad, trying to find things that they can hold up as principles. I'm told that if you don't support bombing brown people in the desert in the Middle East, that I'm not conservative. If I don't support Israel, I'm not conservative. That's what Charlie Kirk was getting from Mark Levine and Ben Shapiro. Oh, he's not a real conservative, doesn't support Israel. Oh, he's not a real conservative, doesn't support the wars. Oh, when did that become conservative? That's the opposite of conservatism traditionally in America. If you go by the roots of conservative movement, which was very non-interventionist, very Ron Paul, Pat Buchanan like foreign policy, when did this all happen? You see, so I mean, I call these things out because I think if people are going to, you know, stand on these titles and these labels, then they damn well better have some principles underpinning those labels and those titles. Otherwise, it's meaningless. It's totally meaningless.
Well, you can go back to say pre-World War I. There was always a strong, they used the term back then, non-interventionist wing in conservative politics that said, we don't want to get involved. There was always a strong they called non-interventionist. So conservative politics always had a nationalist, non-interventionist wing that said, we don't want to go over and fight other people's war in other people's countries unless we're attacked. Now they're pretending like that doesn't exist. There's a redefinition. As an example, the shooter of Kirk, alleged shooter, the guy who's accused. Here's what I've heard. He's a lefty. Here's my question. How do you know? Because he was pro-trans. Okay, how the hell did we have that? I know nothing about any of his other policies. When I tell everybody, how did I get to be a lefty? My dad was a longshoreman. He worked on the docks, and he was in the longshoremen's union. That was my, like, there were guys that were in the hard hat wearing guys. His buddies were truckers. They were in the truckers union. His buddies were electrical workers. They were in whatever the electric, you know what I mean? That was, and these were family kind of fairly, what I would call socially conservative kind of people, actually very socially conservative people. But they were, back then, the left meant you supported the union, you were opposed to war, you didn't trust corporations. That was the left that I was introduced in. And now he's a lefty. Well, tell me about all that. The only thing that matters, he can be pro-war, he can be pro-corporate, pro-big pharma, pro everything that the traditional left that I came up in stood for. Okay.
Yeah.
He can be in favor of all of that crap that we oppose, but he's living with a trans person or something. There we go. That's what makes him a lefty. And then that's an excuse that is used. Okay, we got to crack down on our enemies, whether it's 9/11 and the Patriot Act. Every time there's a major event, the ruling elite, and it doesn't matter which party's in power, when there's a major event, the ruling elite will interpret that and say, X has happened. That means we have to crack down on this group. It's always an excuse for the government to crack down, to increase their powers. And when people say, well, you know, you're a conservative or a Republican, if the Democrats come in next, they're going to have that power, or vice versa. Well, Barack Obama, you know, if you do this and the next guy's a Republican, they never seem to care because they don't really, because they're all working for the same guy, in my opinion.
Yeah. There's an old saying that the American eagle needs two wings to fly, a left wing and a right wing. And if that equation gets out of balance, then that eagle goes into a tailspin. And I think that's you know, what we're seeing. We're seeing that on both ends. That there's a modulating problem right now. There's a lack of balance in the legislatures, and also a lack of principles and a lack of values and a lack of adherence to the U.S. Constitution, which is the glue that's supposed to hold all that together. You know, the traditional left gave us regulations against pharmaceutical companies poisoning people. It gave regulations of manufacturers. Upton Sinclair's The Jungle famously reported and wrote about, sausage factories in
Yeah.
Chicago, people getting thrown into losing body parts into the, the vets. I mean, all that and labor unions also. That was a reaction to the largesse of just business owners, monopolists. That's all that was. And one would argue that this is one of the key recipes of American success, was the fact that it did lead the world and made a climate for better and more ethical business. I'm not saying that it's been perfect, but I think now you can see the corporate power has retaken control. I think that we have to look at the second half of the 20th century as a kind of blip on the radar screen. We're back to and Trump's strapline, the golden age of America. What golden age are we talking about? Are we talking about the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Mellons, the breakers of Rhode Island? Is that what we're talking about? Is the I mean, that's what it seems like. But what's funny about that, Garland, is that golden age. Okay, America. But before America was an interventionist, expeditionary power, extending its global empire. Before that, it wasn't going around the world searching for monsters to slay. But something happened because of the success of American manufacturing and the post-Civil War era and the growth that occurred. And all of a sudden, it had a surplus of goods. And it didn't have any markets to sell them in, no additional markets. So you had a deflationary problem. According to the monarchs, the oligarchs of the time. So, and that's when the Spanish-American War kicked off, and since then it's been a kind of cascading trend to bulldoze into new markets, flood them with American goods and services, or now debt in some cases, just dollar debt. But that all started at the turn of the 20th century, you see. And so we're still stuck in the undertow of history, I think. And it's just so entrenched, the special interests, the huge lobbies. I mean, we know the Israeli lobby is big, but the ag lobby is bigger,
The pharma lobby, huge.
The pharma lobby. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about some major interests here, hundreds of billions of dollars of discretionary funds they have to make sure they get what they want. And they do get what they want. They get what they want. They definitely got what they wanted with Trump in the first term, with Operation Warp Speed and all of that. So, but that's what I try to point people to, is to look at this big picture here. Look at these forces. These are powerful forces that are converging in Washington. And you know what? I grew up in Bowie, Maryland, as a young child, not Prince George's County. It's very different back then than it was. I was only there till I was about 5 years old, and my family's very active in politics at the time, and our that area, Washington D.C., if even 20 years ago, it's unrecognizable. The amount of money, I is probably the most densely, I mean, in terms of money and growth and capital in that area, in the greater DC area, than any other place in the world, probably. And you know what? Where's all that money coming from? What kind of money is that? And it's lobby money from different industries, not just the military, but all of the lobbies, foreign and domestic and transnational. That's the money that pours in there. Then you start to really understand what kind of concern you're dealing with here. This is a major kind of machine that Washington, D.C. is the hub of. And so that power projects globally. And the blood that runs through that global octopus is called the US dollar, is the world reserve currency. That's the source of American power. The military is just there to back it up. But the real source of American power is the dollar, is the world reserve currency. And they're struggling right now. They're struggling right now to find new markets for the dollar. And there's trends happening in the world like BRICS, and the blowback from the Middle East is, I think, going to be severe for the U.S. The supporting of Israel, this is not going to be good for them in the long run. So, the U.S. has to make some big decisions. Trump, I don't know how much of this is, Trump's cognizant or conscious of all this. He seems to be playing a role on behalf of some bigger forces in some cases, but the execution of it's very ham-fisted, very sloppy, reckless, unstable. So I don't know. It's hard to get a read on this, Garland, like with, other administrations that sort of are more conventional and adroit in how they're putting policy down. Even if it's bad policy, it's still, there's a sort of method there. You can kind of read the lines. It's not easy to do with this particular term, especially this Trump term.
One of the things that's interesting, you started seeing that during COVID, where people would say, we have questions, and the idea that the claim where they take a sledgehammer and beat them down. Not, we're going to talk about the questions, we're going to answer them. It's like, we're going to crush the people who have questions so massively, so powerfully that everyone else will be scared to ask questions, right? You started seeing that in COVID. And now, we see people who, thrown out of the country, lose their jobs if they say the wrong thing, whatever. We see people getting deported. If you want to come to the U.S., they're going to literally will look at your social media to see if you said something bad about Israel first. You can say plenty of things bad about the U.S., anything, but you can't say anything bad about Israel, right? And here's my point that I want to throw at you. The ruling elite are always, they have nothing but contention for the rest of us working, the great unwashed, I guess, as they see us. But it seems like it's so far apart now. Like what Macron and Starmer and these people, they've got like 13-14% approval ratings. People are saying we're unhappy with this. Tremendous percentages of people, overwhelming percentages, are unhappy with what's going on in Gaza with the ruling elite. The ruling elite's like, shut up or we'll take action against you, right? Your thoughts on that gulf now between the ruling elite and the people, and they can hide, they've been hiding it, they ain't hiding it anymore. They can't hide it anymore. And what seems to me obviously coming political and social instability, both, especially the UK is going to blow up. It's God only knows what's going to happen in the UK and France. But here also, your thoughts on that dynamic.
Yeah. It's pretty clear now. If you look at the approval ratings across the board, we'll just talk about the G7, the major European leaders, they're all toggling between 20 and 30%, 30 if they're lucky, 35 if they're really lucky. France, Germany, UK, any of the main European countries. United States, Trump, same thing. Trump's approval ratings in the toilet. And so you see a divergence of policy. I think that's what you're alluding to, the divergence of what the ruling class is putting forth for policy and what the public generally favor. A big gulf between these two things. It's bigger than ever. What else is bigger than ever is the wealth gap. The wealth gap between the top elite billionaire class, and that increased by leaps and bounds during the COVID crisis. Okay. And then the underclass, the working poor, which is something that, it's like you can talk all you want about free markets and libertarian economic ideals and so forth, but you cannot get around this problem that people cannot afford to live even at the standard that their parents could live at, or just to afford the basics without going into debt and taking on credit card debt. It's just, in America anyway, it's impossible. So, and the cost of medical care is just continues to skyrocket. So you can't get around these things, because the problem is it's not the case in every country. You see, Americans are told they have the best medical system in the world. I beg to differ with that. It's not true. It's wildly overpriced, and it's almost perverse, the sort of bills that people get stuck with, and how that system sucks the wealth out of families in the last years of the life of various members of families, and that's what the system does. And what you pay in terms of premiums per year and deductibles without even getting care, you know, it's basically a gambling exercise. You know, you're betting on your health and you're wagering, and you're playing at a giant craps table with the insurance companies and the HMOs and the healthcare providers. So that said, these aren't big issues if you're Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, or you work for Google or Facebook. These aren't big issues. Those are fixed overheads, and they cost nothing. Nor does your electric or your cost of heating. It doesn't even register, or the car you drive. But for the majority of Americans and people around the world, it does. It does mean something. And so that's a big problem. So, how did we get here? How did we get to this point? And what could be done? The problem with Europe, I can speak. I don't think the UK is going to go up in a sort of civil chaos. I think this is a controlled theatrical performance that you're seeing with Tommy Robinson and all of this stuff. France is a different story. That's a different story. The French have a tradition, a history, and a willingness to get out on the street and literally chase them out of the Élysée Palace. That could very well happen. And the French gendarmerie or the police could turn in favor of the people and against the government. That could happen. It's not going to happen in the UK. And in the US, no, neither. That would also not happen in the US, although there could be pockets of unrest. Ditto with Germany. And so we have a kind of the real crisis is with the EU. I think this idea of liberalism and democracy, and the EU has always thought it could expand on the basis of expanding democracy. And I think the EU has hit the wall right now, and it's hit the wall in the East. It can't go any further. It really believed that it could coax countries, even not in the EU, to change their social policies, to restructure in order to get access to the EU common market, which was the biggest single market in the world for a while. It's no longer the case. And it's getting worse as a direct result of EU and NATO policy. NATO was the enforcement arm to try to hammer home and hammer out new democracies, you see. So the EU and NATO both have an expansionist policy. And it will even harmonize things in its orbit that aren't even in their membership. They could still exert their power to get them to comply all around the world. In fact, the EU trade missions and their trade offices demanding ESGs, demanding all this sort of recognizing all these social. They have to do that. They have to do that, almost like the IMF in a way, kind of a soft version of the IMF, where they'll get people to restructure whatever their government policies, social, etc., in order to get access to the EU market for imports from an African country, for instance. You're talking socially conservative countries in the Middle East or Africa having to liberalize to get access to the EU market. That's the power. The EU, in their documents, you read their documents in the last 10, 15 years, they called it, quote, the power of attraction. The power of attraction to our market. Now, the United States also had this, and the United States used this to great effect. This helped to make the U.S. great. And now you have a president that's declared war, economic war on everybody, even their allies, using tariffs as sanctions. So that was the peace dividend. This was the sales pitch. This was the American sales pitch internationally. And the WTO, and I laugh when I see JD Vance and all these guys trash the UN and all of these multilateral institutions, like, oh, the WTO is ripping us off. It's not ripping you off. Having a flat 2% tariff for all these member countries created unprecedented levels of growth globally. And it lifted a lot of people out of poverty as well. So, globalization, which is not the same as globalism, but the brain dead right have merged those two things together, thanks to a few commentators that are huge. I won't mention any names, but merged globalization with globalism. They're two different things. They merged the WEF and Klaus Schwab with the WTO, and then put China in this sort of enemies column, because China is taking advantage. They're selling us all these cheap goods and taking our dollars and, buying our T-bills and getting leverage over us. And we can't. This can't happen. We can't do this anymore. And the Europeans, they're taking advantage of us. Like we're defending the Europeans. America isn't defending Europe from anything. Russia's not going to steamroll Europe. America is there to it's the post World War II order was America would provide the collective defense for Germany and Europe, had bases all over Europe, not just Germany. And then for the Pacific, ditto with Japan. Okay. It's the same deal. And in exchange, we gave Japan access to the American market so they could rebuild. So we didn't have to pay for rebuilding Japan. It paid for itself by allowing Japanese products into the US market. The same with Germany. Exactly the same with Germany. So, and what did we get in return? They created the euro dollars. They held all these dollars in Europe, and all these different dollars and bonds and financial instruments that helped to prop up the dollar as a global reserve currency, so that it didn't collapse because we're running a $2 trillion a year deficit, because we're printing an extra $2 trillion a year to fund our military, which we use to basically kick everybody's ass. When I hear conservatives like J.D. Vance, we're tired of paying for NATO, and it's bullshit. It's all bullshit. These people I can't believe either they don't know what they're talking about, but these people that festoon around talking about America's the greatest country, make America great, American power. They don't even understand how America has accumulated and controlled the world after the Second World War. They've done it through the United Nations, through the Security Council, through all these multilateral institutions, the IMF, the WTO. They've gamed everything. America has gamed all of it for its advantage, and secondarily for the advantage of its favored allies and client states. So, I mean, I hope J.D. Vance and all these thought leaders understand that, but because it's unraveling now. I mean, I'm kind of like, is Donald Trump's task, whether he knows it or not, to basically unwind American power and hegemony? Because he's doing that. He's doing a brilliant job of it, and in quick fashion. That's what's happening. And so all these people, this echo chamber of, conservative pundits and Fox News and Newsmax and all these people, they think Trump's making America great again. He's not. He's taking America down a notch, and America is pulling Europe down with it, you see, by enforcing these sanctions policies against Russia and China, and now India as well. Total suicide for Europe. So, I mean, it's either by design and they don't know they're playing the role in it, or they're doing it in a very sloppy and reckless way where they're actually ending up getting the opposite result of what they're advertising. I can't work out which one it is, though. It's hard.
Well, kind of like a drowning man, the guy falls in the water, can't swim. He's grabbing for anything he can to pull on. So that's why it looks hectic and chaotic. And if somebody tries to help him, he'll grab them and pull them down and drown them with them. It's that hectic and chaos of desperation.
Well, if you're a lifeguard, if you're a trained lifeguard, Garland, not to jump in.
Right, exactly.
Because they will pull you down. And that's what a lot of countries are looking at the U.S. now. We're not going to jump in and help or partner with you. Just if you're going to be like this, we're looking east. Donald Trump has done more for BRICS than anybody in the BRICS countries, just by threatening secondary sanctions against anyone buying Russian oil from India or trading with India. Just that threat alone has turbocharged the BRICS movement. Wow. And only Trump could have done it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I used to out on the bay do a lot of search and rescue stuff. Was one of the things I did and train search and rescue. And for rescue swimming, there used to be a saying. The saying used to be if somebody falls in the water, reach, throw, go. If you got something long, reach that out that they can grab. If you don't find something that floats, throw. Your last thing is go and save them. They changed it to reach, throw, don't go, because you're just going to
Don't
drown
go.
yourself. If
Yeah.
they're going to drown, then only one person drowns. Don't go down with them. If you can't save them, don't jump in the water because you right. And that's it. If you try to save a drowning man, you're going down with him. And here's the thing, too, with the EU. The US says don't buy stuff from Russia and China. Well, who does that mean you got to buy stuff from? Me? You know what I mean? They're taking Europe out deliberately. Hey, it's got a nice price you're getting on that gas and oil from Russia, huh? Yeah, it's cheap. Don't buy that from them. The Ruskies are bad. Well, really, who will I buy it from? I'd be happy to sell it to you for 7 times the price. And the Europeans are like, gee, thanks. You're really a close friend for us.
Yeah.
And the US is like, yeah, would you mind cutting stuff off from China too? Who am I going to buy that stuff from? We don't make it. You know what the US will do? They'll buy it from China and resell it and mark it up to the Brits, to the UK. I guarantee they'll damn do that. If these idiots will stop buying from China, the US will buy the stuff instead, mark it up and sell it. I mean, these people are suckers, but I think there's some people in Europe, like Starmer and these people that keep coming to the U.S. saying, well, it looks like the Russians are going to win in Ukraine. We need you to come in and give us a security backstop and this and that. Are they stupid enough? They don't understand the United States. The United States will never. They'll leave them out. They will put them out on an island. They'll leave them out to roast at the hands of the Russians. They won't send one troop. The U.S. Ask the South Vietnamese. What happens in Afghanistan? The U.S. goes in, causes all kind of mayhem, launders all kind of money, and when everything goes to hell, they exercise the Samsonite option. They pack their bags and they get the hell out of there. And these
But
Europeans,
they'll come back, Garland, to mop it up and hand out the Marshall Plan stipends. They'll come back for that.
oh yeah, but when there's more money to be laundered. But these guys, the Macrons and the Starmers, that actually think they're going to call Trump and Vance are going to send troops or ships or go fight, they're idiots. The United States never does that. That's why they use proxy forces. So you can die and you can get crushed and destroyed and they won't have to.
If you look at history, you look at the last 300 years, and you look at who controlled global trade, who controlled commerce, not just controlled the maritime trade, Britain, okay, and financed it, Holland, the Netherlands, okay, very close relationship with Britain and the City of London, okay, and the United States then became a maritime superpower in their own right in the 20th century, and so you look at that, and so if France or Germany was to work closer with Russia, and then you have overland trade routes like the Belt and Road, which one of the first big stops is going to be Iran. It's going to connect down to the Indian Ocean and then across to China and through Pakistan and Afghanistan. So that was what Britain called the Great Game. They had to prevent the Silk Road from happening because that would cut them out. And America became the second part of that concern. So the island nation of Britain and the Americans across the Atlantic. And it's about pulling Western Europe towards them and not allowing it to drift east. And this has been the raison d'etre, or the raison d'etat, if you will, of the British Empire and the American Empire and the Anglo-American Empire, which exerts control over Western Europe for the last 200 or 300 years. So that we're still stuck in this old paradigm. All of these wars, Israel itself is part of that paradigm. Is the creation of Israel, the maintenance of Israel, is part of that. We're stuck in the past, Garland. That's the world is stuck in the past, and these people of the last generation of them, or last two generations, are kicking and screaming to avoid the reality of what's coming. And the reality is China is not a poverty-stricken rural backwater anymore. It was, but it's not anymore. And neither is India, and neither is Brazil. And you can't go around with this posture that you had when you enjoyed total spectrum dominance. And when you're in a different world, what are you expecting to happen? You can't just sabotage, disrupt, and ruin everybody else's enterprises. You can't. But that's what's happening right now. Ukraine is the front line of this. They're so scared. Do you realize the industrial power of Russia? Potentially. Imagine if Russia had unfettered access to European markets and global markets and US market. What would Russia become? Global superpower. Undoubtedly. They would be right up there with China. Probably China and Russia number 1 and 2. Probably. But the Cold War and now this phase we're in has prevented that from happening. There's a reason for that. And that's the great game. That's the great game. Where this is the great game 2.0. Will there be a great game 3.0? No, I don't think so. I think this is it. 2.0 is the last episode of the great game because the world has changed.
And we can end up with this. And if you understand the game, right, the North Koreans fight the South Koreans. The Sunni Muslims got to fight the Shia Muslims, right? It's always this. It's always you go in, the Slavs in Ukraine have to fight the Slavs in Russia. Their game is always the same. We'll find these groups that have everything in common and we'll we'll divide them, get them to fight, we conquer them, divide and conquer. Okay. Now, to me, if you ask me, and it's obvious after this Charlie Kirk thing, we're all a bunch of working class people. But they want the vaccinated to look down on and fight the unvaccinated. They want you're a right conservative or whatever to fight. Oh, this guy's your enemy. He's a lefty. However, they decide to determine. It's the same thing. People who are all being screwed by the ruling elite, who can no longer afford, to send their kids to college, can no longer afford a house, a car, or anything like that. They find a way to say, yeah, but he's a lefty and this person's a righty and you should hate each other, cheer for each other's deaths, murder, or whatever. And they divide people in the same country and get those people to fight against each other. So we're not looking at the ruling elite people who are taking us to the cleaners.
Yeah, it's much better that we're fighting each other, not fighting them, or holding them to account, or no pitchforks coming out for the state, but plenty of us going at it. They want you to pick a side, Garland. On this side, it's it's left, it's Marxist, it's socialism, it's pro-Palestine, it's pro-LGBT, pro-trans, and they stack it all up. And the other side, they say, oh no, it's conservative, it's free market, it's capitalism, it's pro-Israel, it's pro family values, it's etc. They say pro-freedom, but they're not really pro-freedom, as we discussed. But saying that's that stack on the right as a stack on the left. Pick your stack. You can't be in between. You can't take bits from each side. No. We're going to polarize this right down the middle. Pick a side, because if you stand with Palestine, then you stand with trans. This is how they play it. And I'm going to say Charlie Kirk did a very good job of creating these polarized paradigms, and that's what he was paid to do. That's what the billionaire class that funded Turning Point expected of him to do. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done it. And in his death, they're doing the same thing. They're using him to further polarize using these two false paradigms, artificial, completely fabricated, totally contrived value sets on the right and the left that do not correspond to real life at all, not at all. And so, and again, without risking Garland sounding like a socialist or a lefty, there is something to be said. They created identity politics, the establishment. They created identity. They weaponized identity politics because they wanted a culture war rather than a class war, because class warfare is problematic for the establishment. So because when little man realized he's getting screwed, and Jeff Bezos is worth $1 trillion a year, and the median income in a lot of the bits of the United States can't even afford, the kids will never be able to afford to buy property as it stands. Then that would be pitchforks. But they've done such a good job at creating these new divisions through the culture wars that people forget. They identify with brands and political identity and gender ideology rather than identify with working class, and not even in a Marxist way. Like you said, your pops, labor union, dock workers union, socially conservative, Christian, church on Sunday, family outings, normal American life. That's not how people define the left now. It's totally different. So that's a huge victory for the establishment, the elite establishment, in my opinion. And that's me coming from I probably a center-right position, giving that evaluation. And I'm going to piss off some conservatives. I don't care, because it's true.
Right, because not every, the politics are nuanced, and human beings are nuanced, and not every person fits nice, and that's what they want to tell us. Everybody fits nice and comfortably. We've created these two categories, and everybody has to fit nice and comfortably into these categories. And when they say, okay, well, blah, 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 I've had people, oh, well, so you voted for Kamala Harris. I'm like, you got to be freaking kidding me. There ain't no way in hell I vote for Kamala. She said everything that I believe in, and plus she's an idiot. Oh, and they're like, oh, but you're a lefty. I'm like, which means I never vote for Kamala Harris because she's against everything I believe in, right? But they don't understand that, as you've said and that I've discussed. We can have this left-right discussion. We can go back to the French Revolution and the origin of left-right and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, there is a reality that we all have to live and survive, and human beings are nuanced. And they want to pretend like you're not allowed to be a regular old nuanced human beings, and some things you agree with here and some things you agree with there. Because then when you ask Garland, are you going to vote for this particular candidate? I say, well, let me see what this candidate stands for. Let me see what their positions are on the various things. Not, well, this person's a female of color or whatever the hell, and so you got to vote for her. Or, well, we're conservatives, and this is our conservative candidate. And if you're a conservative, you don't get to say, well, wait a minute, let me look at the issues I believe in and see if this person aligns with. Well, no, we are not allowed to do a detailed observation of politics and policies. It's simply that person's a member of my group, and that person's a member of that group, and therefore, I've got to select based on these group dynamics, which are created for me by the ruling elite, who ain't a member of none of our groups.
Yeah, I had state education, high school, and university in California. Okay, so I was trained to be a good leftist. I was expected that's where I was going to be, because the whole system funnels you that way.
Right.
But what pushed me away from a little bit, what started nudging me, was Bill Clinton's attack on Yugoslavia. Okay. That was one of them. The Monica Lewinsky scandal, of course, that was also a big moment, red pill moment. But then the right at that time wasn't really a good home either, with George Bush Jr. coming in so early with the Iraq War, post 9/11. And then, so I was a registered Democrat in the 90s and most of the early part of the 2000s. But the Iraq War just shattered that for Clinton and Bush, and Biden's role in the Iraq War cannot be discounted as well, because he was the chief whip on the Democrat side to make that war. So that was a bipartisan war. The Iraq War was bipartisan, 100%. It was only Ron Paul coming in 2008 that opened up a possibility that there's a third way here that's possibly available. And so that pulled me back into the Republican Party, because he was running as a Republican. Okay. So, but, even then, now we're seeing people on the Democrat side reevaluating this whole crazy trans identity politics thing. And now they're coming back to the center. There's a lot of Democrats coming back to the center, pro-human rights, with traditional values, maybe a little more socially conservative or moderate. And so I'm gonna give them a look on the ballot. I will give these people a look. I was kind of voting down ballot for a few years because things had got so crazy and polarized with Trump. But those days might be finished now. Now we might be looking at, we have to evaluate the person, the issues, and it's not going to be a binary vote anymore. And so I'm looking at all these issues again. And so as participants in our democracy, our constitutional Republican democracy, democratic experiment, we're going to have to go and do some work again. We can't sit back on autopilot. You're going to have to read and pay attention to stuff like our parents did, like we did many years ago. But we've all been on social media autopilot, Garland, the last couple of years, I think. I don't know if you agree or not, but
yes, that was the game plan. Yeah. Well, we'll have to, understand. And, there's the Bernies and the AOCs, they're really good also at putting people out there to pretend to be something different when they're not. So we got to be wary of that. At any rate, thanks a lot, Patrick Henningsen. Everybody, let me show you one more time. 21st Century. There we go. 21stcenturywire.com. That's Patrick's site. You go there. All of his good works are there. You can see across the top. Make sure you follow them on all their social media platforms. You see that they're all over the place. They have their show, The Sunday Wire, and a lot of great articles, a lot of good stuff. 21stcenturywire.com. Thanks a lot, Patrick. Appreciate you, taking time out of your busy schedule, and hope we can get you on again maybe next week if you're available.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks, Garland. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. And don't forget, everybody, the most important thing you can do is share this on all your social media platforms. We're out.